These two couples seem to have nothing in common until their decisions lead them to cross paths in the worst possible way, and no one comes out unscathed. This story begins with the last straw that broke the camel's back. Jeffrey Byron is a successful businessman, young, attractive, confident. Or at least that's what he projects. One afternoon he enters his office and everything seems normal. He sits at his desk and asks his assistant if his wife has called. She didn't, so he asks for a whiskey. It's still early, but he doesn't care anymore. Suddenly, without warning, Jeffrey stands up, goes out onto the building's balcony and climbs onto the ledge. He paces back and forth, hesitating. Down below, the city goes on as usual. No one looks up. No one knows that a man is considering ceasing to exist. His life as it is no longer enough for him. However, he gets down to the ground and continues his routine. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Marion Byron, his beautiful wife, is shopping for clothes with a friend, and as they talk, she confesses a very specific fear. She feels that Jeffrey is going to leave her, but she doesn't talk about divorce. She's referring to something worse, as if without knowing it, she were connected to that man standing on a ledge. In parallel, Lucky Man appears, a seductive contractor from the working class who fixes both houses and other people's hearts. He's working at the house of one of Marion's acquaintances. They talk about plumbing, but the double meaning is obvious. Lucky doesn't need to make an effort. He seduces naturally without even realizing it. When he finishes his work, he has sex with that woman, and it doesn't seem to be the first time he's confused work with desire. That night, Phyllis, Lucky's wife, waits for him at home. She is a retired actress who has become a depressive and alcoholic woman. When her husband arrives, she acts annoyed. However, the two of them have an agreement. They can have extramarital affairs, as long as feelings aren't involved. Even though Lucky tries to get close, Phyllis just watches TV and remains distant. In reality, she is carrying a pain that has a deeper reason than jealousy, and it has not yet been revealed. We return to the Byrons. Marion waits for her husband at home in a sexy dress, ready to reconnect. But he comes in, looks at her and pays her no attention. He doesn't even notice the effort. Marion insists, but Jeffrey's mind is elsewhere and his distant attitude makes her cry. The night is a fiasco. But before going to bed, something is mentioned that will be the beginning of the break. The next day, a contractor will come to fix a lock. It's Lucky. In the morning, Lucky takes Phyllis to the doctor because she's worried about her health. However, the doctor assures her that there is nothing seriously wrong. The thing is, Phyllis's problem isn't physical, it's emotional, and no one is diagnosing it. Meanwhile, Marion is alone at home. At that moment, the doorbell interrupts her. She gets dressed and runs to the door. Lucky has arrived. The attraction is immediate and obvious. They both know it, and that's why they start talking as if they've known each other their whole lives. The young woman needed someone to listen to her, and she found the right man. It's not desire that brings them together at first, it's attention. During the day, they talk about possible renovations to the house. Marion wants to build a room for her future child, even though she's not even pregnant. However, Lucky understands her wishes and agrees to do the work. On the other hand, Phyllis is alone and completely drunk in a park. Her sadness is obvious until suddenly she sees a young woman in the distance. It's Cassie, her daughter, or at least that's what she thinks. She runs toward her, calling her by name and sincerely apologizes. But the young woman leaves without even looking at her, as if she were a ghost. At the same time, Jeffrey once again stands on the edge of the balcony at his office when a co-worker immediately stops him and saves his life. It seems that Phyllis isn't the only one who is suffering. At night, Lucky meets Phyllis at a restaurant, notices that she's drunk and asks her to stop drinking. At that moment, the conversation becomes tense. She tells him about her brief encounter with Cassie, but her husband orders her to get her out of her head because she won't be coming back. There's a pain that both of them have shared for 8 years, the departure of their daughter. The next morning, Marion is having breakfast with Jeffrey when she tells him that she has decided to build a room for a future child, a revelation that completely unsettles him. He doesn't want children, nor does he want that kind of life. Marion is so disappointed that she confronts him with an ultimatum. If he doesn't start valuing her, she'll build that life with another man. Unfortunately, Jeffrey doesn't react and leaves, leaving her alone once again. Very shortly after, Lucky arrives and finds Marion crying, and she hugs him without explaining what's wrong. Without asking unnecessary questions, he comforts her like no one else can. At that moment, Lucky explains that he needs to go get some tools from his car and will be back in a few minutes. After he leaves her alone, Marion puts on an attractive outfit to wait for him, but someone rings the doorbell. Marion runs to the door, but it's Jeffrey who has come back and notices she's a bit too happy and suspects something is going on, so he leaves again, angry. She even wishes he would leave so she can have her moment alone with Lucky. And in fact, that very afternoon the marriage will finally fall apart. During the day, Marion openly seduces Lucky. She asks him where he would go to meet someone. He mentions the bar at the Ritz Hotel, a detail the young woman immediately writes down in her calendar. And that's when something crucial is revealed. She is at her most fertile period. Marianne doesn't just want a lover, she wants a child at any cost. Fortunately for her, she's not far from getting what she wants. That afternoon, they make love in the jacuzzi. But here's where things get serious. Jeffrey, without knowing it, makes everything easier. He leaves a message saying he'll be away all weekend on a business trip, and so, without any of the four fully realizing it yet, the pieces are set in place for disaster. At the same time, Phyllis returns to the park where she thinks she saw Cassie. She sits, watches, waits, but she can't find her. Hours go by, and Jeffrey, on the other hand, returns home to pick up some things before his trip. At that moment, he finds evidence of the romantic afternoon his wife spent with another man, music, clothes strewn about, and a mess. But that's not the worst part. Marianne and Lucky are at the bar in the Ritz Hotel, flirting and kissing in public without a care. Both of them act as if the world doesn't exist beyond that table, but they don't know they're being watched. Phyllis is in that same bar because she has followed her husband. However, she doesn't make a scene. Instead, she suffers in silence because it confirms something she already knew. She was always alone, even while married. At that moment, Jeffrey arrives at the same bar, since he read the name of the place in Marianne's calendar. He doesn't find her, but he sees a beautiful woman crying alone in a corner. It's Phyllis. Immediately, he sits down next to her and orders a bottle of wine for the two of them. She notices his engagement ring, but Jeffrey confesses that his wife is cheating on him, and the two of them start a conversation about their unfaithful partners. Two strangers, two broken marriages, one bar. Nothing good can come of this. At the same time, Marianne returns home with Lucky, who grabs his things and leaves, planning to come back the next day. Meanwhile, Jeffrey and Phyllis keep talking, getting closer and closer. He tells her something unthinkable. She's the most fascinating woman he's ever met, and for that reason, he invites her to spend the weekend at a house in the mountains. No matter how drunk she is, Phyllis doesn't accept. Lucky gets home and doesn't find his wife since she's still with Jeffrey, making out in a car like a teenager who doesn't think about the consequences. The young man keeps telling her over and over that she should go with him on the weekend trip, but Phyllis firmly stops him and gets out of the car to go back to her husband. Once home, she tries to reconnect with Lucky in bed. She seeks intimacy, closeness, something to confirm that they're still a married couple, but he rejects her. This situation makes her explode to the point of hitting him. In the end, both of them sit in silence. In the morning, Marianne, alone, empties Jeffrey's wardrobe and throws his suits on the floor in spite. Meanwhile, he is about to travel, but at that very moment Phyllis arrives, having decided to accompany him after the failed night with her husband. A few hours later, Lucky is working in Marianne's baby's room while kissing her passionately. He no longer seems like a contractor, he looks like a future father. Once at the hotel, Phyllis sets a condition to protect herself from exposure, separate rooms with Jeffrey. During a dinner, Phyllis entertains an entire table of Jeffrey's acquaintances by sharing her stories as an actress. It is here that she confesses something devastating, but which explains a lot. Years ago, she had her daughter Cassie with a lover and lied to Lucky, telling him the child was his. The day he found out the truth, he exploded, to the point of shouting, "That girl isn't mine!" Unfortunately, Cassie heard him and her heart broke into 1,000 pieces. At the same time, Lucky wakes up on his couch. He had fallen asleep watching his wife's movies. Without caring about the time, he rushes out to find Marianne, and they go bowling, where they spend a wonderful night full of laughter and romance. The next day, everyone returns to their lives. Marianne has taken Jeffrey's things out and wants a divorce. She goes looking for Lucky, who is doing repairs in the new room of the house, and talks to him about her decision. The conversation becomes increasingly deep. They talk about their failed marriages. At that moment, Lucky reveals the whole truth. When Cassie heard him shout, "That girl isn't mine!" 8 years ago, something inside her broke forever. She sent them a letter confessing that she never wanted to see them again and left, never to return. That guilt eats him alive. Maybe it's not love that holds that marriage together, but the shared responsibility for ruining their own daughter's life. Later, Jeffrey and Phyllis arrive in the city, and before saying goodbye, they decide to have one last drink at the same bar where they first met, to end their trip on a high note. But fate has other plans. As they walk in, the scene hits them without warning. Marianne is there, sitting next to Lucky, extremely affectionate. Jeffrey doesn't think, he reacts. He goes straight for the man, hits him, and the confrontation quickly escalates into a violent fight. The bar staff act quickly and throw Lucky out onto the street. But that's not all. Phyllis watches the situation unfold. She approaches Marianne and introduces herself as Jeffrey's companion. Marianne, who still doesn't know that she's Lucky's wife, doesn't react with anger. She even accepts the invitation to leave with her to talk about what happened, and they get into the car together. Meanwhile, the two men start their vehicles almost at the same time and drive at full speed toward the same destination as the women, the Byron house. During the drive, the wives talk. Marianne speaks about Jeffrey with detachment. She doesn't care about the cheating. Phyllis listens, smiles, but remains silent. She still hasn't confessed that she's married to Lucky. They arrive at the apartment and make coffee. The conversation is almost friendly, until Marianne shows the room under construction. Phyllis understands immediately. No confession is needed. Lucky is going to be a father with another woman. The betrayal comes full circle. Years ago, a lie destroyed a daughter. Now, another lie promises to repeat the damage. The tension erupts when both men arrive at the apartment. Insults, blows, and years of pent-up resentment come to the surface. In the midst of the chaos, Phyllis says her husband's full name, and Marianne finally understands that she is not just Jeffrey's lover. Lucky runs after Phyllis, begging her to forgive him. But he doesn't succeed. And, in an almost absurd way, Marianne and Jeffrey start kissing again, as if the conflict had reignited a spark that had long been extinguished. They even end up having sex on the apartment floor. But the fantasy doesn't last long because Jeffrey gets dressed and leaves without any explanation. And so Marianne is left alone once again, crying. For a moment, she believed the marriage could be saved. Days go by. During a lunch with a friend, Marianne confirms her pregnancy. Although she doesn't know who the father is, she tells her friend it's Jeffrey's and adds something important. She's finally getting a divorce. That night wasn't a reconciliation. It was a farewell. At that very moment, but in another part of the city, something terrible happens. Jeffrey gets out of a taxi in the middle of traffic, walks to the railing of a bridge, and climbs up. This time, he doesn't hesitate like he did before, and he falls. Everyone present gets out of their cars and runs toward the scene. It's here that it's discovered the impact wasn't fatal. There's grass below and he only broke a leg. At the same time, Lucky is in the park where Phyllis mentioned she had seen her daughter. This time, his intuition is right. Cassie is there just a few meters away. When he sees her, he immediately runs to meet her, but the young woman walks in the opposite direction, as if she doesn't recognize him. Finally, he catches up to her, and they reunite after 8 years of suffering. Even though she doesn't say a single word to him, Lucky apologizes over and over, begging her to forgive him. There is no embrace or immediate relief, only the certainty that the harm was real, and so is the regret. Meanwhile, Marianne returns home by taxi. At that moment, she caresses her belly and whispers to the child who has not yet been born, "I love you." Even though the journey has been imperfect, she has achieved her deepest wish, to become a mother. Hours later, Lucky arrives home and finds Phyllis crying in bed. He hugs her without saying a single word. They don't ask for explanations. They don't need them. Because their bond has survived things worse than infidelity. And then, the unexpected happens. Cassie enters the house to finally reunite with her parents. This story shows that there are no isolated betrayals, because a deception is not the beginning of the conflict, but its consequence.